Hi there and welcome to the channel. I'm Slate and today we are kicking off a brand new series. This is Build a Champ, where we are going to go over how to build heroes in Watch Your Realms. This is going to be the basics guide, and then every week we're going to go over one hero in particular, look at their kit and what their build needs are in more detail. And so yeah, anyway, without further ado, let's get started. First up, let's talk about our DPS units. These are our damage dealers. They are primarily your fighters, your marksmen, and then also your mages. And the way that you want to build them is obviously to do a lot of damage. Now, attack is key, and so the main build points that we are going to go over when you are gearing is essentially this. You want to make sure that they have as much attack as possible. Then you want to make sure that they are crit capped. That means getting it to about 100% unless they have something in their kit that gives them crit rate. Then you want to make sure that they have speed and crit damage. And then you can look at survivability with HP and rage regen. In terms of progression, we definitely want to prioritize stats over sets. Now, this is because whilst the sets do provide a nice stat bonus, for example, insight, basically most of the time, unless you have really good pieces, it is going to be better to go broken. So for example here, this is going to be Iona. Yes, she's crit cap, she's under 200 crit damage, she's very slow at 100, and she has that 14k attack. And if we go broken, yes, we lose a tiny bit of attack, but we make up for it with a speed. We keep the crit and we keep the crit damage. So actually, this is one of those situations where usually actually broken is going to be more helpful. Now, as part of the Volca questlines, you do get this Doom set as well as Deadly Aim, and it does roll pretty nicely. And as you can see here, it's a pretty decent set. It's obviously way over crit rate, so you could very easily then swap this out. And this is sort of what I mean by broken. If you were to immediately change this to an attack bonus, you would definitely improve those stats, you see. And so yeah, definitely when you're talking about progression, that is going to be more important. In terms of sets, obviously we are going to be looking at Soulbound Arcana and Infernal Roar as the sort of premium late game sets. Cataclysm is your premium Forge set. You also have Wisdom, Insight, Night Terror. These are your ascendables into those nice top sets. Aegis Wrath is another fantastic one. It's mainly very good for BP, but it does actually help quite a lot with the crit damage. If you've got some nice pieces of that. And then a few other sets I'd say is basically Curse is really lovely. But pretty much all the others, so Fatality, Fracture, Hawkeye, Doom, they fall off very, very quickly. So you do tend to move away from these as you progress in the game. Now, one of the big questions that always comes up is, what is the difference between Soulbound Arcana and Infernal Roar, and who do you put on what? Or what do you put on who, should I say? So Infernal Roar increases basic attack damage by 40%, and Soulbound Arcana says that after the ultimate is cast, damage increases by 10% permanently, stacking up to 5 times, which is basically a 50% bonus. And this is slightly bugged because it actually works with any ultimates. So if an ally uses their ultimate, it seems to give the Soulbound Arcana buff boost. So yeah, one of the big questions is, well, who gets what? And a general rule of thumb is basically, the way I like to look at it is the ultimate of the hero an extension of their basic attack? You put them in Infernal Roar, and if it is different, then it is going to be Soulbound Arcana. So we can see here with Silas, it says damage is increased by 80%, and each attack becomes this slightly special thing where it ignores defense and magic resistance. Valkra's ultimate is it increases damage by 50%. It consumes a shield and does a little bit like that. Whereas Twin Fiend's ultimate is completely different. It marks a target and then it creates a meteorite, so he would be Soulbound Arcana. Arrogance, again, he enters a completely different stance, and then he basically changes what he does with his kit, so he's going to be in Soulbound Arcana. So yeah, so basically that is the general rule of thumb that I would say to sort of suggest, do you put them in Infernal Roar? Do you put them in Soulbound Arcana? But essentially there are nuances to every single hero, and that's why this series will go over heroes on an individual basis. Now, in terms of artifacts, one thing I will say that is highly overlooked is the Keen Wisdom artifact. This is an absolutely amazing progression artifact, and this is because it's very cheap to upgrade, and it gives a 16% increase to attack, which obviously we said attack is absolutely key. So I definitely say this is well worth investing in early on. Try and get a couple of sets. You're going to get way more damage and like increase to your hero than a level 1 artifact most of the time. Obviously exclusives are another whole category, and generally speaking a lot of exclusives are fantastic on heroes. Famous example is obviously Hex's one, but a lot of them are not so good. A really decent example actually are a lot of mage artifacts. Where is Comet? Comet is absolutely fantastic in a lot of content, but his artifact is pretty lackluster in comparison to, Tear of Twilight, basically. Anyway, back to the different artifacts for different classes. For fighters, there are quite a few different options for artifacts. Like I said, we are looking at Keen Wisdom. There aren't too many legendary artifacts. The only one sort of really of note is the Watchguard's Ambition, which increases the chance to trigger another basic attack. This is quite nice on a few heroes that do multiple hits. Then we are looking at Lunacy Visor. This increases block by 1, which is fantastic for these if you want to use a little bit of a block on your DPS. We also have a really lovely thing with Scarlet Hunt, which inflicts more damage to targets with bleed. You also have Realm Tear, which is increasing damage depending on how far away they are. This is fantastic on your long range fighters. We also have Frigid Flame, which is good in certain content as it has a damage increase when you're not taking damage. We also have the pièce de résistance of Wailing Skull, where essentially it summons a little spawn thing that takes on the hero's attributes and deals damage itself. Key for those when you are looking to get a little bit tankier on your fighters, slight sort of like DPS mixture build. To be fair, this is probably more what I'd call a tank artifact, which we'll get into very soon. Then we have the brand new Shattered Hilt artifact, increases single target damage. This is a really nice one. And then you can also use Eye of Sin, which is for AoE damage. So basically fighters have a lot of really lovely mythic artifacts, not really any legendary artifacts, but they also do very well with Keen Wisdom. Now in terms of marksman, there's less options, to be completely honest. We have the Spirit Siphon, which increases damage dealt to the same target. This is fantastic for boss content. You have Sharpshooter's Crest, which increases AoE damage. This is a really important artifact, Ichor Chalice, and that is because you really sort of need it in order to progress with Gear Dungeon 2. You only really need one of these, and essentially you can get it from the guild shop, so at some point definitely worth sort of picking that up. The Reaper's Emblem is pretty decent as well. And then the other fantastic new one is going to be the Blight Caller's Claw. I can never say it. I call it the Bone Bow. It increases single target damage. It's a recent addition and I absolutely love it. And then we have two really lovely legendary artifacts. First up is Idril's Gaze, because it gives a chance to ignore defense and magic resistance, and then we also have the Shadow Gaze artifact as well. So yeah, they are your main options for marksmen. Next is going to be mages, and to be completely honest, it's a little bit simpler. We have the White Tower Trinket as your progression artifact. It's, pretty straightforward. And then the main one that you're going to be using for DPS is going to be your Tear of Twilight. Most of the other mythic artifacts, they have niche uses, but they're really not very good, to be completely honest. And then you have two other ones for mages, but we're going to talk about these two, which are more to do with rage, when we get later on in the video and talk about how to build our debuffers. So yeah, those are the basics of how to build DPS. Just to recap, you want to stack as much attack as possible, then you can look into those other nice stats. Always make sure you're prioritizing stats over sets. Make sure you have an appropriate artifact. And yeah, that is the basics on how to build DPS units. Let's move on to the next category. Next up, we're going to talk about how to build tanks. This is predominantly the defender class. They are built to protect your team and take damage. Now, some fighters can also be used as a tank. A really lovely example of this is going to be Abomination. You can also use Ajira. There are a couple of different options for that, but essentially these are your frontline heroes. Now, HP is absolutely king in this game. And so you want to stack as much HP as possible on your heroes. Unfortunately, defense just doesn't scale as well. So you are going to be looking to basically build your heroes with 3 HP bonus stats on the right hand side. And then you are also going to be looking at HP on the left, but just look for those defense substats. Then once you have HP and defense percentage, speed and rage regen are also lovely sort of like bonus stats to be looking for, and that is because a lot of defenders, they have ultimates that protect themselves or protect the team or do something interesting. So actually getting some rage regen on them is very, very nice, but that is definitely something you're going to look at the end or sort of like much more late game. Now, in terms of sets, we are going to be looking at the most amazing set in the game, which is Guardian. And the reason I say that is it is the only tier 1 set that is viable in endgame. It is absolutely fantastic because it reduces the damage that your hero will take by 15%. You also have the couple of forge sets, Tempered Will, which has the damage reduction, but it also increases defense for each enemy block, stacking up to 4 times. It was previously bugged with this defense stacking not really happening, but that does seem to be fixed. So yeah, just keep an eye on it. But essentially, it's a really lovely gear set, sort of like a boost up on the Guardian. And then Unshaken Will is another absolutely fantastic forge set, and that is because it increases HP by 20%. It recovers 5% max HP every 5 seconds. In terms of a couple of other options, if you're looking for progression, you could use Acephalus. This has max HP plus 10% with healing effect, but again, I would absolutely go Broken if I was using progression tank way more, because again, getting those HP high rolls with the good stats is going to be a lot better than this sort of like 10% max HP. The exception for that is Guardian. A really bad Guardian is going to do more for you than a broken set, as long as it is all HP bonus. Now, the other one that you can also look at is another forge set, and that is Morale, which boosts your team. Basically, this is definitely more for boss content than PvE, generally speaking, because your tanks are going to still take quite a lot of damage if they are in Morale, but it is a very good set. And then if you are talking about your fighters that are going to be used as a tank, the options, you've got a lovely set called Glacier, which gains an attack bonus equal to 6% max HP when deployed. That's quite a nice option as well. And you kind of want to mix DPS stats with HP in order to do it. It's a slightly more difficult build. It's a slightly more niche, so I will cover it in more specific videos. And then, of course, for the left-hand side, how could I forget? We are going to be looking at Life Force when you're getting started, which is plus 25% HP, moving up to Immortal Warrior, which is going to be that plus 25% HP, but including 10% defense. And then finally, the Astral Guardian Forge set, which is 30% HP and 15% defense. So obviously, Astral Guardian, these are nice little like step ups each time. Now, in terms of artifacts, like I said, for fighters, you are basically going to be looking at this Key of Forsaken, which increases max HP, and you're going to be looking at Lunacy Visor, which increases block and also recovers HP. And then for your defenders, really there's only one Bastion slot, and that is Bastion Ring. And that is because Bastion Ring increases block by 1, and it increases physical and magic damage reduction, stacking up to 4 times, 9%. That is a lovely 36% when it is fully skilled up. And then there are a couple of other basically ones. There is Tuning Crystal, which is when you are actually using your defender as a damage dealer, so it's slightly more niche. And Astral Obelisk, which is when you are using a unit like Constance for attack and slightly more healer. So they are definitely more niche. General rule of thumb, stick him in a Bastion Ring. And if you don't have a Bastion Ring, a really lovely progression one is actually going to be the Watchguard's Unity, which is just a straight up plus max HP. It's very, very basic, but it does come in handy. Moving on to our next class of heroes, this is going to be our healers. These are units that keep the team alive, and they are primarily the healer class. There are a few outliers in the defenders in the fact that Constance does healing as well as Muriel, but yeah, they are definitely not classed as healers, and we will be going over them as niche heroes. And then the other thing is that yes, you do have some funky mechanics where, you know, Volker allows for some passive healing, or you have built-in mechanics like Wrath's A5 where he is able to heal himself, but essentially that is not what we're talking about when we are talking about healers. We are talking about units that primary purpose is to keep your units on the board alive by healing them, and they also often have a couple of extra funky mechanics, mainly something called Inspiration. Dolores is the most famous example for Inspiration. Inspiration is a boost that essentially boosts the attack based on the caster's attack. So that is a slightly different build, and we will sort of, generally speaking, cover that here as well. So in terms of how you build your healers, it's very straightforward. You want them to do three things. 1, be as fast as possible. 2, rage as much as possible so that they get their ultimates out. And 3, make sure that they have enough healing stat to keep themselves and your heroes alive. In terms of sets, again, if you are in progression, it is much better to go broken, as there are not many good early game healer sets. You essentially do have this Acephalus set, which is plus 10% max HP and plus 20 healing effect. And then the main one that you are going to be wanting to move into is Invigoration or Wings of Grace. Now, Invigoration places a 10% attack buff on another unit, and Wings of Grace puts a 12% attack buff and also has this lovely healing effect bonus as well. I mean, Invig has the healing effect bonus as well. So yeah, basically these are the two main healer sets. One of the big mistakes I do see though when doing takeovers is that once you get these sets, they are absolutely fantastic, but it is not worth sacrificing stats when you first get this set. You can always get a cheap unit. A really lovely example of this is actually Aatrox. He is a 6 unit cost, and you could put him in what's called trash wings or Invigoration. These are ones that basically, you know, they could be flat stat, they could be whatever it is, they don't even have to be leveled, and you could use that hero to just pop the Invigoration on your DPS and make sure that it means that your healers are still well built. Now, like I said, in terms of stats, the main priority is going to make sure they have some survivability, make sure that they are as fast as possible, and then making sure they have some rage regen. Now, rage regen is capped basically at 132%. It sort of is exponentially scaling, but essentially anything over 132% just doesn't seem to do much. And then the healing effect is sort of also capped at 100. So they're the sort of like top ends that you're looking for, and generally speaking, you are going to want an attack speed amulet with a rage regen ring, and then a HP bonus or attack bonus main. Now, again, depending on the unit that you're building, this will vary in terms of how you decided to build them. You might also have a healing effect main stat. That is going to, again, depend on the niche. In terms of left-hand side gear, there are a couple of options. Obviously, there is Salvation early on, which is a healing effect. This is a nice set because it's the only one with Ancients outside Forges that you can get both attack speed and rage regen on the pieces, which is really, really lovely. You can also use Whirlwind when you're looking, because it does have that plus 75% speed, so there's a really lovely progression piece as well. You could also look at Calamity and Whirlwind for your attack-based healers, because it does give that attack boost, 25% attack and attack speed. And then we also have the new Light's Grace, which is a Forge set, which has healing effect and 10% rage regen, which is pretty decent as well. Now, in terms of artifacts, if you are building an inspiration unit, honestly, Keen Wisdom is going to carry you much, much further until you get a maxed Golden Scarab. Golden Scarab is absolutely fantastic because it increases rage regen by 50% when fully skilled up. But essentially, you do not want to be losing that attack stat 16% versus 5%, unless it is making sure that you are getting the rage regen in return. Now, the other options that we have is obviously Euphoric Orb is fantastic, increases attack speed of all heroes. Tyre's Balm helps when you are healing heroes with less HP. And then you also have the Elysian Epitaph, which is here on Vortex, which increases single target healing. There is a beautiful legendary artifact that you do want to make sure you have one of, called Tumultuous Horn, and this increases initial rage by 50% when deployed. This is fantastic in certain content where you want to drop your healer, ult with them immediately, and then pick them back up. So yeah, they are the main things. Now, yeah, just to say, Golden Scarab is an absolutely fantastic artifact. I'm not dissing it. It is absolutely amazing. It's just not worth using a single version of it over Keen Wisdom on your inspiration units when you are trying to progress. But yeah, that is the main basics for how to build healers. Get them fast, get them ulting, and make sure they have enough HP and healing stat to do so. And finally, we are going to move on to a final category, which is our debuffers. They don't have a set class. This can be found across the different units, but the sort of most famous ones are going to be Greed. He does a huge amount of CCing on his ultimate and puts out mana resistance and burning and slows. And then obviously Mari, who is your day 3 login, and that is because here she has this passive where she puts out physical and magic damage as well, and she slows units. You're basically, this category covers anything that puts out essentially debuffs. Other options you could look at are, funnily enough, Volker. She has on her ultimate, she has vulnerabilities. She also has a chance to put out damage reduction, which is really helpful with boss content as well. And then a really, really great hero that is often overlooked is the uncommon called Liam. He is one of the very few units in the game to have something called Neurotoxin, which deals continuous true damage equal to 1% of the target's max HP, stacking up 3 times. He is fantastic for progression because he can take down bosses, and essentially he's definitely someone that you want to build as a debuffer. So how do you build a debuffer? Well, let's have a look at our little friendly Liam here and use him as an example. Essentially, the 3 main principles are you want them to be fast, you want them to be raging, so it's very similar to healers, but you want to make sure they also have enough survivability. So you're going to be looking for HP bonus with attack speed and rage regen, and again, better to be broken than anything else. Attack speed with rage regen and HP bonus. And then you are going to want rage regen with HP and attack bonus. And then for the left-hand side, you are going to be looking at, ideally, Whirlwind, make them nice and fast. You could also make them tanky with Immortal Warrior or Life Force or Astral Guardian. You could even chuck in a Whirlwind if you wanted. But obviously the ideal set that you can get them in is Mana Spring. Why Mana Spring? Because it increases the rage regen auto by 3. I would also say, again, this is where Salvation, funnily enough, is a fantastic option for these types of heroes because, like I said, they're one of the very few units that actually has rage regen and attack speed on both chest and weapon in ancient form. So you can see here, you can get it on a Whirlwind piece, but then you can't get it on a Whirlwind thing. And then obviously you can get it in forge pieces, but that's a little bit harder to come by. The other option that you could do is a speedy Guardian build. A really lovely example of this is actually Livian for APOC. Essentially, you want her getting her stuns out. But again, that is a slightly niche build, so we will go into that in future detail if you want it. Now, in terms of artifacts, like I said earlier, I sort of skimmed through it. When you are looking at these artifacts, there are two main ones for the mages, which funnily enough are the ones that seem to do the most debuffing. It is going to be Nightmare Samsara, which restores 5% rage for every 5 attacks, and then the other option is Spellcaster's Echo, which recovers 15% rage after using a skill. These are your two main ones. You could also potentially use Tome of Horror, and then for the other classes, it is basically looking for anything that is going to increase rage regen, which unfortunately there aren't actually that many options. So you tend to then use something else to boost them effectively. So yeah, they're the main ones. And that is essentially how you build your debuffers, because what you want them to do, like I said, is to put out their debuffs as often as possible. Usually these debuffs are like only a couple of seconds, usually about max 3 seconds. So if you can get them to be hitting faster than that, you're in the clear. And obviously the other option is you can also build these in Invigoration. Again, slightly niche, slightly one of those things. But yeah, that is the main basics of how to build the main types of hero that you have in Watcher of Realms. Now, one other really quick thing to note is that in the gear section, there are these recommendation settings where you can import plans. I do have a video for all players for all different stages. That is going to be linked in the description below. So definitely go check that out if you are wondering. It'll help your gear cleansing by letting you know, depending on where you are in the game, whether gear is worth keeping or not. So yeah, that is the basics. Do join me next week where we will go over one of the heroes in more detail, and every week after that as well. So yeah, do let me know in the comments below, are there any heroes that you are interested in seeing? I will add them to the list and try to get through them as soon as I can. But yeah, that is everything from me today. Do like and subscribe if you haven't already. I look forward to seeing you in the next video and the next live stream. So until then, take care and bye for now.